Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Energy and Equity and Energy podcast, man. Today we have Hope Shimabuku.
Shimabuku, very good.
Okay. Thank you, Hope. She is our regional director of the Texas Regional United States Patent and Transfer Office. Hope, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. Really appreciate being here.
It's always exciting. We love the fact, I think you're out, like you say, you're out of the Houston office?
Actually, I'm out of Dallas, and
Out of
so
the Dallas office.
yeah, the Texas Regional Office is based out of Dallas.
Okay. So, and being right there, our next door state is kind of, we consider this pretty much the Gulf Coast region. Because anything that happens here is pretty much you guys are going to get a little bit of it as well. So it's always great to add to the family. And so,
absolutely, love to see you here.
Yeah. So can you kind of give us a little insight about your journey, man? Like how did things kick off and start out for you?
That's a great question. And Leroy, thank you again for having me here. I am very excited to be here. And so when I was actually growing up, I thought that every school had an astronaut visiting them every month.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Houston, Texas, right by the Johnson Space Center, and the families and the parents and everyone that was around me were either computer scientists, astronauts, or working for NASA in some way. My own mom was actually also working for NASA as she was a computer programmer, and she worked on the Apollo missions when I was younger. And so growing up in Houston, technology was always around me. And so that really led me to become an engineer. And I went to the University of Texas for undergraduate, received an undergraduate in mechanical engineering, and worked as an engineer for 6 years before going to law school. And so I made Sunny D Hawaiian Punch. And
thank you.
You're welcome. 8-year-olds were my favorite friend at that time.
Yeah.
And I also made Dell computers before going to law school at SMU here in Dallas. And I went into intellectual property law, specifically patent law, practiced for about 6 years as an attorney for a couple of law firms, and then went in-house to work for BlackBerry. At that time, they were known as Research in Motion. And then went also to work for Xerox before joining the USPTO about 8 years ago.
Okay. So that's a really interesting journey. So you had a chance to, obviously as an engineer, you had a chance to create and kind of build some things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I was working with Procter & Gamble that made at that time Hawaiian Punch and Sunny D, they've since sold both those product lines, I believe. And so I was able to kind of see the innovation of just the product itself, the making operations and all the equipment and everything that was designed in order to be able to support that operation. Then with Dell Computers, I actually started and was the project manager on one of their lines when we were converting the computers from the white-backed computers to the black-backed computers, which is really what the standard is these days, and we're seeing the covers be black. And so just seeing that innovation in play was fantastic.
Okay, so we go from getting involved with some, like you said, working as an engineer, then also working as an attorney. So now it's coming together. Now you also have some background in diversity and inclusion as well. So can you kind of tell me how that has kind of driven your passion as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So diversity and inclusion have always been a big part of my life and things that I think are very important. And one of the reasons is because I've always been what we call one of the few, right? When I was growing up in elementary school, middle school, high school, I was always one of the few Asians in the area. At that time, Houston was not as diverse as it is currently now. And so there was just not that many people who looked like me at that time. I also was one of the few going into engineering school. And every single professor knew who I was and knew me by name because I was one of the few females in the engineering school. And so because of that, being one of the few and recognizing that I was one of the few, I always felt like I was blazing the path or trailblazing. And
Mhm.
there were a lot of people who really invested in me and making me successful, mentored me, championed me, even though they may not have looked like me, but just was really there. And for me, paying it forward because of the investment they made in me was also really, really important. I think one of the big things for me as well, from a cultural standpoint, is knowing the fact that my parents sacrificed a lot to be able to come to the United States, and that's really developed who I am. My mom came to the United States when she was very young in sixth grade. A church sponsored her to come and move and immigrate from Taiwan. They were the first Chinese family to land in Pierre, South Dakota.
Wow.
They came over with very little. My mom had two sets of clothes, and I remember that she said that the church had to do a drive in order for them to get winter clothes and to get a coat, because as you can imagine, South Dakota is a little bit colder than Taiwan, and so
Just a little bit.
yep,
Just
needed clothes. My dad, he came when he was in college, and he rode a boat for a month to travel over here so that he could go to engineering school. He went to Oklahoma State, where he graduated with an undergrad and a master's in engineering. And so coming over with only $100 in his pocket when he showed up, and the backpack full of clothes, those were his only personal belongings when he came here. So with that, knowing the struggles that they came with really was a big background for me, and understanding that, hey, I needed to be able to work hard so that I could be in the place that I am currently right now and successful in the place I am right now.
I think that's and that story is very similar to a lot of our founders, man. Like when we start looking at ideas and concepts that they're working on, working to honor a parent, or to definitely based on the experience be able to do something for their family that that family may not have been able to do for them. But just being able to look at that background and experiences that they've had, and still be like, I want to do something, and I want to do something that's going to honor my folks and my folks and my family is a big piece. And that a lot of our founders here are just very similar experiences.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah. And it's a great motivating factor too.
I agree. I agree.
So you've been involved in various professional organizations and boards. I mean, it sounds like you probably had a lot of different experiences. Can you discuss how these experiences have shaped like your approach to leadership and also to engagement? Because a lot of times when we get those opportunities to sit at big tables, we forget about the community that we have to engage with.
Well, I think that it is really important for everyone to engage with organizations and to be able to serve and give back, not only because of, from my background, making sure that I can give back, but I think it's really about thinking outside your own circumstances and really being able to contribute to others and the journey and to be able to help them. And really, sometimes just getting out of your comfort zone is really important. And so while I'm an engineer, I am not the typical engineer in the sense that I grew up with a hammer and nails, building everything and doing everything myself. And so doing things like that are things that I'm not comfortable with. I've contributed to building houses and framing houses. And the first time I did it, all I remember is the frame was crooked. And the construction manager had to take it apart and told us, let's do this again and make sure that it's straight. Right? But I mean, living through those experiences and contributing to those who are in need and just having that shared experience with the people who are there, I think is really important. The other thing that I think is super important from an organization standpoint is just understanding and developing leadership skills. Because I think that when you are in these professional organizations or in these community organizations, one of the things that you learn about leadership is how do you motivate and encourage volunteers. It's a little bit different when they're working for you and they're your employee, because you have a little bit of a stick in which, you know, if they're not doing well, you can discipline them and other things. But understanding that you need to figure out a way to motivate them. And sometimes passion and hard work is not enough. You need to be able to explain to them, hey, what are the benefits of doing this? And then the other thing that you can recognize is starting to see, hey, these people are really good at this, but they have the potential for this. And being able to develop them and start to develop them is really important. Some of the other things that I also learned in these organizations is how to run a meeting, right? Not everyone's good at running meetings, but if you take a leadership role and you're expected to set the agenda, making sure that you get through everything, hit the high points, the important points, running through those agendas, it's a skill and it's not something that everyone is really good at. Managing budgets. A lot of times the budgets are super small, but that's okay because you got to figure out how to stretch every dollar that you bring in and figure out what the most important things that you need to do. Make sure that you are filing your taxes, doing all those other financial obligations, all the skills that you need to do from a business standpoint and a professional standpoint. Being able to bring that over, I think, is a great way to be able to do that through these professional organizations.
So you're saying networking with those professional organizations, you were able to just add to your resources and just people who were there to kind of mentor and help you through the process of doing all those things?
Yes, I think that that's part of it, right? Being a part of those organizations, taking leadership roles, getting mentored by other, learning those skills, but also learning the resources that are currently out there. And so, like for the USPTO, we have a lot of resources that we provide for individuals that I know that we're going to talk about in a little bit, and to be able to help entrepreneurs and small businesses succeed.
So what has been the most fulfilling, what do you think has been the most fulfilling part of what you're doing and the work that you're implementing?
So for me, currently, there's a couple of things. One is, one of the big things that I do is I have the opportunity to teach others about intellectual property and the importance of intellectual property to what they do. And I think that letting them know and letting them see, and then the light bulb bing goes on, then I think that that is a great way and something that's really inspiring, because I don't think that people realize that every business has intellectual property. And when you think about what is intellectual property, it's property. So like your house, or like your computer equipment, or anything else that you own, you can do anything with intellectual property that you can do with real property, or tangible property, as we call it. You can sell it, you can give it away, you can rent it out. In intellectual property terms, it's called licensing. And so seeing that light bulb go on and letting people know that, hey, I have intellectual property. I didn't even realize I had intellectual property that I can sell, and there is value associated with that. I love seeing that. The other thing that I find truly inspiring is just the innovation that people have from all levels, whether it's K through 12, to business owners or to sophisticated business owners. There's so much innovation. I remember participating in a science fair. It was just this last year, and it was the high schoolers that were out there. One of the things that really inspired me was there was a high schooler who had come up with a mathematical formula, brand new mathematical formula that he developed to measure solar flares coming off of the sun. It was a calculation that he had developed, and I'm sitting there thinking, you're in high school. I would have never come up with something like that, but he has developed something like that. And then I also remember talking to another business owner here, actually in the Dallas area, in which he came up with an innovation using AI, but also big data. And so he had embedded this software code into the game Roblox. And what he was trying to do was to be able to find the source of some area of cancer, because there was a pathway, but he needed a lot of people and a lot of data power to be able to help find this. And so people were playing the game Roblox, but they didn't realize that as they were doing that, they were actually trying to solve a solution to be able to find the source of where cancer was coming from for this particular problem that he was trying to solve. So innovations like that are happening out there. And it is so cool to hear about that, and so cool that we're able to be able to contribute to their innovation journey and be able to encourage them with intellectual property and how to protect their innovations.
And I love it because I think we were talking earlier, you guys have some teaching materials that we're going to make available as well.
Yes, absolutely. And so some of the things that the USPTO does, we do a great job in IP education and being able to provide that education and those resources to individuals. So one of the two most popular programs that we have are what we call a Path to a Patent, as well as a Trademark Boot Camp. Both of those are virtually presented. They are courses that are presented once a week, and it's an hour-long course. And it's a series. It's an 8-part series that repeats throughout the year. And it goes through the process of filing a trademark, and it goes through a process of preparing and filing a patent. And so this happens, and you can check out our website at www.uspto.gov. You can also see some of the information that is scrolling at the bottom right there to be able to find that information. But that's one of our most popular courses that people take. It is given live, so there's a subject matter expert that is presenting, and then you can ask questions after the presentation is over as well. And so an excellent resource. Some of the other things that you're seeing as well is an IP identifier tool. That tool helps you identify intellectual property that you may not realize that you own. So when we're talking about intellectual property, there's really 4 buckets that we're talking about: patents, trademarks, copyrights, and trade secrets. The first 2 buckets, patents and trademarks, is what our office covers, or my office. Copyrights is covered by the Copyright Office, and trade secrets, no office covers that because it's a secret. And so, and I know that we're going to go into a detail a little bit more as we go on what each of those intellectual property buckets are.
Let's just kind of get into it. What are the key benefits of obtaining a patent for a new innovation?
So that's a really great question. There's a lot of benefits in getting a patent. And so from a statistical standpoint, we know that economically, those who have patents or intellectual property as a business, they tend to do better overall. One is that from a patent standpoint, if you have a patent or patent pending status, you are 70% more likely to get funding at the end of the day. You are also likely, as an employee of a organization that has a lot of IP or in an IP intensive industry, you tend to make more money. Your growth potential tends to be a lot higher after the first year of receiving a patent. Currently, we know that intellectual property or IP intensive industries account for 40% of the gross domestic product, or the GDP, of the United States. And it contributes trillions of dollars every year. And the economic benefits of having intellectual property, of owning intellectual property, are real because we can see it in the numbers.
Now, is that data something that can be made available? Because I think that's really, really good information, just understanding the value of having protected property and how it can how it actually benefits you and generates money. And that may be something that becomes a reason to pursue, to be very diligent in pursuing that patent.
Absolutely. We actually have a number of studies that we have posted on our website
Mhm.
on intellectual property and the economic benefits of intellectual property. Our chief economist puts this out on a regular basis. And so the most recent study, I think, came out last year. And so, though it is the I'm going to butcher the name. I think it's the IP, the economics of IP. I can't remember what exactly the name of that study is. And so hopefully that will be scrolling in the screen pretty soon. But I know that that study is online. The other study that's online is we've done a number of different studies on the economic benefit of female inventorship. And
Yeah.
so one of the things that we've really focused on and we've really tried to do is expand the innovation ecosystem. Remember when I talked about, at the beginning, one of the things that I'm really passionate about is diversity because I am one of the few, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
one of the few in engineering is also translated into one of the few for those who are women in the innovation sphere. And so right now, based on the studies that we have seen, only 12.9% of all inventors on all of our patents are women, and it's increased over time, but it hasn't increased significantly. And at the rate that we're going right now, it's going to be over 100 years before we even get to parity. And so, because of that, we are really trying to encourage women inventors in particular to be able to get into the ecosystem. We know statistically that 40% of the workforce is women. We also know statistically that about a third of all science and technology employees, those who have that background, are women. But we also know that only 12.9% of them are filing or listed on a patent. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit out there. And so because of that, we wanted to show some of the economic benefits that we've seen. And so we have studies that are associated with that as well.
Okay, so we talked about some of the benefits, and this is exciting. We in getting women more involved in the patent process, and probably in just getting more of all of our founders, Black, brown, underserved founders, everyone more aware and educated on this process. What are some of the things you think that innovators need to be aware of regarding the application process?
So one of the things that I think innovators need to be aware of is that it is patents in particular. So patents, what a patent is, it is something that you're protecting your widgets and your inventions, right? So
Mhm.
if you've come up with a new product or a new way of making that product, or you've come up with a new process, right? That is what could be protected by a patent.
Mhm.
Now, the patent process itself, the process to prepare the application, to apply for it, is a very complicated process, and it's actually a long process. And so sometimes you could even get caught up in simple things like making sure that you're paying the right fees, if you have the right paperwork, or getting everything in. And so all of those things and the entire process in and of itself is fairly complicated. And because it's fairly complicated, it can get very expensive, especially with respect to the attorney fees. And
Mhm.
so the USPTO has a lot of partnerships and a lot of organizations out there that we work with to be able to provide access for everyone to be able to be a part of the innovation ecosystem. We have partnerships throughout the entire country in which we can provide pro bono help for those who may not be able to afford attorney at the end of the day. And so every single state actually has at least one pro bono organization which has volunteer attorneys who have volunteered their time to be able to help provide free legal services, particularly in the patent space. And so where you are, Leroy, in Louisiana, the group that is providing that is called the Ella Project. But no matter where you are in the country, like I said, we have an organization covering a state, and all of that information can be found on our website. Another organization or another great resource is the law school clinics. And so law school clinics are law students who are supervised by practicing attorneys to be able to provide legal services.
Mhm.
And so in Louisiana, we are very fortunate to be able to have the law school clinic at Southern University, in which
Yep.
they have both a patent and trademark law school clinic. But there are clinics throughout the entire country as well. And so they service many clients that are in different states. And so you can also look up those local contacts as well on our website. The third resource that I really want to highlight is the Patent and Trademark Resource Centers. And these are librarians who have been trained by our office to be able to provide basic IP information, but also be able to help those who are looking to do a search from a patent and a trademark side. One of the things that we highly encourage is that before you go down the path of a patent, for example, that you do a search to see what is already out there. Because the last thing that you want to do is to spend effort and money investing in all of these things, and the item has already been invented and already been patented by our office. Same thing when it comes to a trademark. So a trademark is a source identifier. So typically trademarks are either a word, right? It's the name of your company or the name of your product, or it's the logo that you've developed. And so before you invest a lot of time into branding and marketing materials, what you want to make sure is that someone else doesn't own that trademark. And so doing a search for that trademark, as well as doing a search for a patent, that's what the the PTRC librarians are there for you to be able to help with that process. And so in Louisiana, there's actually two PTRCs, one located again at Southern University, this time at the university piece instead of the law center, and then one at LSU as well. So they both have PTRC librarians that can help answer those questions.
And I'm going to take one quick pause for the cause. Send a shout out to Chancellor Pierre and all the folks over at Southern University. Man, we've had a chance to spend some time with them. They do a great job of making all of their resources available, be it through the law school, ag, they've been a wonderful, awesome to work with. And then shout out to LSU too, man, because we love the Tigers. I went to Tulane, but we still love the Tigers. But they're all part of our ecosystem, and we have access to these things. So for our founders who are they're interested in this, I think the first thing she says we got to be aware of is being able to research and find the resources and organizations that can support the process that we're about to start. Right.
Absolutely. And they are there to help you. Now, of course, you could always call me, right, in my office or folks at the USPTO, but these are resources that are on the ground in the Louisiana area that are ready and willing to help.
And you say that now, my founders will call you. I tell you, we got a lot of connections to a lot of founders here, and they will call you if they have a question. So when we send out our newsletter, guys, make sure you look we're going to look at Hope's podcast, but you're going to have a lot of resources there that can help you as well.
Absolutely.
What are some of the common mistakes you think that new inventors may make when applying for a patent?
So one of the things, in addition to the fact that it is a complicated process, I think one of the things to keep in mind that it is a long process.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So right now it takes on average about 25 months start to finish.
Wow.
And that's on average.
Mm-hmm.
And recognizing that it could sometimes be shorter, it could sometimes be longer, but it depends on the technology area that you are in. So it is a long process to get a patent. The other thing that is really important is that it's important for you to file for patent protection early in the process, because sometimes what you forget is when you disclose, when you talk about your invention and your idea, the clock starts ticking. And then after a period of time, you're not going to be able to file for the patent. So for example, If you are at a trade show and you start selling your product or offering for sale your product, the clock starts ticking. And from the time that you start disclosing this, then you have 1 year to file. And that's only in the United States. If you want to get international protection, once you disclose it, you can't file at all. And so just recognizing that if you are disclosing or if you wrote it, if you're a professor, for example, and you have written a paper about your new invention, your new idea, the clock starts ticking once that publishes and that journal publishes at the end of the day. If you go to a pitch competition and you have now disclosed your invention, you have talked about your product, the clock starts ticking and you have 1 year. So understanding and recognizing that that is something that could trigger a clock, and making sure that, hey, the best practice in our mind and what we really encourage is for you to file an application before you start that process. Now, there are a couple of different ways that you can do this. Many times, especially with small businesses and entrepreneurs, they file what's called a provisional application. Okay. That provisional application is kind of a marker in the sand, in the sense that anyone else who will apply for that same application, or that invention or that idea with our office, they can't get it because you've marked it in the sand and you said, hey, I have this idea. Now, the thing with a provisional application, though, is it's not a full-blown application. You're not providing us much information typically when you are filing a provisional application. It's just really a marker in the sand. And you have to file within a year. You have to convert that application to what we call a non-provisional application to get full protection. But a lot of people will file that provisional application so that you can initially get that protection. You can also get the patent pending status at that point in time once you file that provisional application. And then it also protects you when you are disclosing, when you are at the pitch competitions, as you are sharing and discussing your ideas with potential funding groups. It's a way for you to actually protect it, because sometimes you can't get that funder or the angel investor, whoever you are talking to sign an NDA. This is a way for you to start kind of protecting yourself and leveraging that so that you can eventually file a patent if you want to at the end of the day.
Now, and you've done a good job, because I'm kind of rolling through, what we talked about earlier. Our questions been like, we already talked about the fact it takes about 25 months to get to go from start to finish on your patent.
That's the average right now. Now, understand, sometimes it's shorter, sometimes it's longer, right? But right now, it's taking about an average about 25 months to for the entire process to go through our office.
Now, outside that provisional application, is there anything else that can kind of give them a layer of protection while they're talking about their project?
So there's a couple of different areas of intellectual property. We touched a lot on patents right now. Yeah. And so one of the complete opposite of a patent is what we call a trade secret, right? Okay. And so let's say hypothetically, you cannot, for whatever reason, file a patent anymore, right? So one of the conditions exists. Or there's something that you want to protect and you want to keep it a secret. So a trade secret is something that is kept secret, but has monetary value for keeping secret. And so the most famous trade secret that is out there is the Coca-Cola formula, right? And so supposedly that is kept under lock and key, and there's only 2 people who can access the safe for that particular formula. And supposedly it's in 2 safes, right? And the formula is actually cut in half or ripped apart and in 2 safes. But anyways, no one actually knows what the formula or how to make Coca-Cola right now. So best kept trade secret that is currently out there. Mm-hmm. And so the thing with trade secrets is, though, that a lot of times you don't want to keep you don't want a trade secret and you want to file a patent if it is easy to reverse engineer. And so if someone is able to figure out the formula of Coca-Cola very easily, then it may not be something that you want to keep as a trade secret, and you might want to keep it protected under a patent instead. But a patent has a limited life. It's only good for 20 years from the date when you file the application with our office, right? It's a monopoly that you have, but it's only good for that. But a trade secret is good as long as you keep it a secret, and it can be good forever. A couple of other buckets to think about. One is copyright. So copyright is probably the bucket that most people are very familiar with. We grew up in school, people and our teachers reminded us, don't copy what is written down because it's a copyright infringement, right, of whatever book or anything else that you're reading. And so that's typically what you think of that is protected. It is anything that is an original work and it is embodied in a tangible medium. And when we were in school, that tangible medium was a book, right? It was things that were written in a book or on a piece of paper. Something from a technology standpoint that is also protected by copyright is as software code. So something we didn't think about, right? So software code, it's considered an original work, an artistic work, as a matter of fact, and it is embodied in a tangible medium. It is stored in some sort of memory device, whether it's on your computer or something else. So that's why it is considered protected by copyright. And so if you have software code and you didn't, for example, decide to protect it by patents, you can actually protect it through copyrights.
Okay. So now, that has to do with protecting us here in the States. Now,
Right.
when we're talking about, is there things that we consider regarding international patent protection?
So yes, the all intellectual property buckets, whether it's copyrights, trade secrets, patents, or trademarks, they are all protected on a jurisdictional basis, meaning a country by country basis. And every country has their individual laws. Some of them are very similar to what our laws are, but there are different things and different criteria that it takes for you to protect that in different countries. And so some of the things to think about when you're looking at protecting things overseas. Now, overseas international intellectual property protection is very expensive. So you need to be really judicious on thinking about where you want protection. The most typical things to consider that people think about is if you're going to be manufacturing at a particular location, if you're going to be selling in that location, those are probably countries that you might want to get intellectual property protection from. The other thing that you also want to consider as well is if there are countries that have a lot of counterfeit, right? So countries like China, Russia, Brazil, there's a lot of counterfeits that come from those countries. And so it is most common for people to try to get also international protection in those countries. But understand, getting international protection in all those foreign countries can be expensive. Now, the USPTO has treaties and agreements with various organizations or our fellow sister intellectual property organizations like the EPO, which is the European Patent Office, or KIPO, which is the Korean Patent Office. We have treaties with those various organizations so that if you file an application with us, then you can also opt in to filing within those other countries. The same application that you filed with us can be used to be filed in those various applications. And so we have those treaties on the patent side, on the trademark side as well. And so those are things that you can consider filing for, leveraging some of those treaties to be able to make the process a little bit easier. The last thing that I want to point out is that within each of a lot of the countries around the world, we have what we call IP attaches, and
Okay.
they sit in the consulate offices and the embassies around the world. And their job is to be able to help U.S. businesses and companies navigate the intellectual property regimes within those respective countries. And so, for example, we have 3 IP attaches located in China. And so China has a fairly complicated and sophisticated IP system. And as I mentioned, they have a lot of counterfeits as well. And so it can be kind of daunting to be entering into those countries and understanding the IP regimes. So please use them as a resource. They are there for you to be able to help kind of lay the framework, understand where you might want to apply, and understand the IP and legal framework in those countries.
You talked about those countries that we have relationships with just by going through our patent office. We have direct relations with relationships. I'm thinking they're honoring our patent. We talked about, like, I think I don't know if it was Korea. You said just earlier, you said there are countries that actually work directly with the United States Patent and Trademark Office there on their side. Now, is that relationship, are those countries that we should look to manufacture in more because of that relationship?
No, I'm not necessarily saying that. We do have relationships in the sense that we have treaties with them.
Okay.
So, for example, we have this application called the PCT, and it's on the patent side, and it's called the patent Paris. Okay, I don't remember what PCT stands for, but anyways, it allows us, if you file an application, for example, in the United States, and you select the PCT option, you have a bunch of check boxes of all the countries that are part of this treaty that allows you to be able to submit that same application into those countries.
Okay.
Because if you file individually, they each have different requirements, and they each have different translation requirements and different fees and different setup, right? So if you file directly with Korea, for example, you're going to need to file in Korean as opposed to filing in English, right, in the US. And so that allows you to be able to file with one language, but in a different country, to be able to meet those requirements as well, because all the countries have agreed that at a minimum, these are the requirements for you to be able to file an application.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow, this is super. And now I have a whole different appreciation, because we talked about earlier. I just had 2 founders that just received their patents, and shout out to Gizmo and also Zokio for this week just got their patents. But now I'm listening to it, I'm like, man, this was a process to go through.
Yes. So it's congratulations to them. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, congratulations to them. Now, there's some red flag warnings that that an innovation may not be patentable.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we really encourage is, in addition to looking to see if something has already been filed before, that's something that we really truly encourage, because sometimes something's already been filed, and if it's already been filed, then you can't get that application, or you can't get that invention and own that invention that is associated with a patent. A couple of other red flags as well is things that are not patentable. So things that are laws of nature that grow naturally. So for example, grass, right? You can't patent naturally growing grass. You can't patent gravity or a tornado. So those are things that are naturally occurring, natural phenomena or laws of nature, E equals MC squared. That's not something that you're going to be able to patent. So those are things that you can't. It's anything that is man-made, that's created under the sun. So there has to be that inventive component. Now, there have been some recent Supreme Court cases as well that have shifted and made it a little bit more difficult for certain technologies to get patented. One of those areas is software. And so it's not impossible for you to get a patent, but there may be a few more hoops that you need to jump through. Same thing with medical diagnostics and medical tools and things like that. If it is something that is a law of nature, for example, the one case that I'm thinking of is the Mayo case, in which it's talking about the BRCA gene, right, which is an indicator of breast cancer. If it is associated with something that is naturally occurring, then you need to just make sure that you are jumping through a little bit of more hoops, because the natural occurring piece, you will not be able to get a patent on the BRCA gene in and of itself, right? But the diagnostic tools, you'll have to have a little bit more associated with that in order to be able to get the actual patent associated with that.
So the more you can develop, more you can demonstrate innovation, the more.
Right. The more you can demonstrate what we call a practical application for that, the easier it'll be for you to be able to get a patent.
Now, a lot of our guys work with software. You said software is becoming a challenge. Can you give us a little insight on why software is becoming a challenge?
Yeah, so software right now is a bigger challenge because of the Supreme Court case that I mentioned earlier. And so the Supreme Court case said that computer per se does not automatically mean that you get a patent. So what that means is that just because you are automating something does not necessarily mean that is inventive and it is an eligible area for you to be able to get a patent at the end of the day. So you have to have that practical application. You have to tie it to something that is practical in order for you to be able to get that particular patent at the end of the day. Okay.
So we've done our research. We kind of set it up. We had a chance to go meet with the folks at Southern, and we're getting lined up pretty good now. When it comes to patenting, well, I was going to talk a little bit about attorneys, but because we do have a lot of resources that we can actually use before we start spending money. And I think that's one of the things that you're kind of bringing out. Like make sure you do your research, make sure you increase your awareness around this process and utilize the resources that you guys have, because that gets us to a space without having to spend as much money on the front end.
Right.
Okay. So now can you tell me, so the concept of patent infringement, like, can you kind of explain some areas, like how does the concept of patent infringement and how innovators can protect themselves, I guess?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. And so a patent is what we call an exclusionary right, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't give you the right to practice the invention. But as a patent owner who owns a patent and the invention described in the patent, what it prevents is someone cannot make, use, sell, offer to sell, or import the invention described in your patent without your permission, right? It doesn't give you a right to practice that invention, but it prevents others from doing that without your permission. Okay. And so once someone either makes, either uses, sells, offers to sell, or imports your invention that is described in the patent, once someone does that without your permission, that's when an infringement occurs. And so that's when you, as a patent owner, have a right to go after that particular individual for infringing your patent.
Okay. Now, I'm going to ask you, it probably can grow exponentially, but what are some of the potential costs associated with obtaining and maintaining a patent? Like, what would you estimate that process to?
So, from a USPTO standpoint, the USPTO has a number of different fees. And so this is not attorney's fees. Okay, this is attorney's fees aside. So, and there's 3 different buckets with respect to different types of fees. So the USPTO gives a price break to those that are what we call a small entity. So that is an organization that has 500 or less employees, and then micro entities, which is a small entity. But a micro entity, they have less than 5 patents in which they are listed as an inventor or an inventor. So, or an invention, excuse me. And so for a small entity, we give a 60% reduction. And for a micro entity, we give an 80% reduction off of our fees. And so for the filing fee, which is the initial fee that you have to submit when you file with our office, and there's a lot of variables in it, but I'm going to say for a plain Jane application that you're submitting for our office, the full fare is $2,000 for the initial fee with our office. And then there's what we call maintenance fees after you get your patents, right? So you have to file a maintenance fee at the 3.5-year mark, and that's about $2,000. At the 7.5-year mark, that's about close to $3,800, and at the 11.5-year mark, it's about $7,700. Okay, so those are kind of the maintenance fees that are associated with filing a patent with the USPTO. Now, recognize, as I mentioned, 50% reduction off of those fees for 60%, excuse me, for small entities, and 80% for micro entities. Those are the reductions. Now, if you are a first-time filer, meaning you have never filed before, we actually currently have a program in which you can qualify and you can submit your application for free. So if this is your first time that you are filing, you fall into what we call the micro entity status, right? Then you can also file for your application with our office for free.
Wow. Okay. So we're gonna have a ton of resources that we can go to United States Patent and Trademark website to use. We also have Southern and LSU also who are kind of organizations that are helping us out. And you guys are saying that if you're a first time applying for a patent, you can apply your first time for free.
That's right.
All right. So I'm hoping all our founders get a chance to check out this information, because I think that there are people who are even afraid to talk about their projects. Just because they don't know it's not protected, and they will, they don't know how much they can talk about before. And they've gone in rooms and people have came back with variations of their project too. So that type of stuff kind of happens a little bit, but we have all the resources in that first filing. If you're new, can actually be free. So this is good. Now, are there any trends? And I'm also going to say, if there are any questions out there, man, we'll start popping them in so we can, because we only have about 5 minutes left. I do want to make sure we get to the questions. So if there are any questions out there, please let's start popping them in. But are there any specific trends or changes in patent laws that innovators should be aware of?
So that's a really good question. I think that, as everyone knows, that some of the biggest trend right now is associated with AI and innovation associated with that. The law is still developing with respect to AI, and we are still looking at how that is actually going to be affecting the USPTO. Now, we know that the president has issued an executive order associated with AI and making sure that we have the safe, secure, and transparent use and development of AI. And related to that is regulations that are associated with that as well. And so even just today's Wednesday, so yesterday, actually, we just released new information on AI and new examples on patents and claims that should be submitted and how we're going to be evaluating some of those claims on some of those new inventions. And so right now, a lot of things developing, and the law is still developing on a number of those fronts. So we're just gonna have to wait and see how that evolves.
So we have with all your experience, and I think that one of the few, I think I'm literally going to walk away from this conversation with the concept of one of the few. You know, having had to hold that space of, and I definitely get it too. I've been in that space where you are be it a company, be it a classroom, be it whatever, you're the only person that looks like you in that space. So, and we have a lot of one of few founders, you know, that are out there and they're holding that space right now. So what advice do you have for our new founders? May have been overlooked, may have been one of few, but right now they're pursuing a patent. They're excited about their invention. Is there any advice that you have for them?
So I would say don't be afraid to fail, right? And being one of the few, there are a lot of times that you have to fail, and eventually those failures will become successes, and we learn more from our failures at the end of the day. I think having the courage to fail, I think that's huge, especially with being one of the few. You don't want to look like you look dumb asking the wrong question, right? You don't want to be the one that is standing out at the end of the day. But if you have a great idea, if you have a great business or a great invention, my word of advice is go for it. Because yeah, you're gonna fail. Everyone fails. But with that, if you don't fail, then you will never succeed, because that means that you never tried at all. Yes. And so don't be afraid to fail. Have the courage to fail.
Well, and if you run across any inventors, especially in the new energy space, please send them my way. As you guys, and just a shameless plug on the end of our broadcast, as of August 27th is the deadline for the Climate Tech Boot Camp. We are looking for founders, especially for our region. If you're in the Texas area, if you're in Louisiana, Mississippi, especially those folks around that Gulf Coast area, we would love to have you inside of our incubator. As you can see, we have amazing people inside of our resource, inside of our ecosystem, like Hope, willing to have. And when you guys see this list of resources from the United States Patent and Transfer, Patent and Trademark Office, you are going to be blown away. So we are really appreciative of everything that you and Christy's behind the scenes, and thank you for all the hard work that she's doing. I'm gonna have to get off here and talk to her about her husband, because we both went to the same high school, which is crazy in and of itself. But we really appreciate you spending some time with us, sharing all this information, and we will definitely as we get this podcast out, we're gonna have all the resources that you have listed here. We're gonna make sure that stuff is available for our. Oh, okay. We got 2 questions. Let's do it. Awesome. Let's take them. So we got Tim Ben. What happens after 20 years up on your patent?
So after 20 years, it is what is called, it's given to the public. Mm-hmm. So you cannot renew your patent after 20 years. You get a monopoly for 21 years, for 20 years. That prevents anyone else from using, making, selling, offering to sell and import, right, without your permission. Mm-hmm. And then after that, it is given to the public. The idea of the patent system is the sharing of knowledge. And by sharing knowledge, the idea is to be able to advance and promote innovation. And so to push innovation forward. And so that's really what the patent system is, to be able to give you a limited monopoly so that we can promote innovation and move things forward.
Great question, Tim. Tim is one of our founders too. I just want to give him a shout out.
So after 5 patents, assuming you still have less than 500 employees, then you will move into a small entity status. And so it'll just, the only thing it affects is what kind of discount that you get from a patent filing, the filing fees standpoint.
And we do have a couple of seconds if we do have any more questions. Like we said before, all these resources, not only the playback of the video, but all the resources that we have. Another question? I think we do. We're good. Okay, cool. All these, the podcast replay and all the things that we just had a conversation about will be made available. And in fact, I'm looking at the side chat, and we do have the first time a filer information and everything for you guys. So we will be able to, and Hope said that we can call her anytime we want. So we will have all the resources you need, man. We really want to say thank you for tuning in. If you're watching the replay, we appreciate you watching the replay. And as always, thank you, ecosystem. Take care.
Thank you.